Hey YouTube, this is Archangel for Truth, and today my topic is on a YouTuber who calls himself FW in Florida. Now, the reason why I'm doing a video on this YouTuber is because, well, this person has kind of stalked me as to wherever I leave comments about your sovereign rights and constitutional arguments for the right to drive and so forth. And so he's on several anti-sovereign YouTube channels. And so I felt, you know what? I've tried to address this person in a respectful way, whereas he always reverts back to name-calling and just being disrespectful and not being able to accept we have a difference of opinion. So basically what it is FW in Florida, this video's for you. I've tried to deal with you as a person-to-person, and I can see clearly that your mentality is not there to deal with an individual with respect and just people being able to have a difference of opinion. So now I'm doing this video. I'm going to address some of the arguments and complaints, and ultimately, hopefully, this will end your stupidity, but I kind of doubt it. At any rate, so the controversy between myself and this YouTuber is the question of sovereignty. And so I've done a couple videos discussing this topic about how we are endowed with sovereignty by our Creator and our inalienable rights, and that the Declaration of Independence talks about this, and I even show video of a Supreme Justice confirming that the people have sovereignty. It's not the government, it's the people. And what sovereignty the government should have is because the people give it to the government. And so ultimately our sovereignty is given to us by our God, whereas the government, their sovereignty is given it to them by those who wish to be a part of their system. And so part of the issue at hand is between myself and FW is the question about the right to drive. Now, FW will claim that it's not a right, that it's a privilege, and that is something that is often repeated by law enforcement and by their the vehicle codes, but it doesn't get really at the heart of the issue. It really doesn't address the question at hand. So, do you have a right to drive? Now, in fairness to FW, he brings up several cases that talk about driving But there's one case that he has that addresses a 14th Amendment question or complaint before the court to address the issue whether or not there is a right to drive. And so the courts decided in that case that the 14th Amendment would not give individuals a right to drive. Now, for those who do not know what the 14th Amendment is, the 14th Amendment is an equal protection clause, or the Equal Protection Amendment. And so I agree that the 14th wouldn't really address the right to drive. So he keeps using this case as his go-to as proving that, oh, you don't have a constitutional right to drive. But as I keep bringing out to his attention that there is a constitutional right to drive or travel, whichever you want to call it. You know, sovereigns will call it traveling, and anti-sovereigns will call it driving. It doesn't really matter. Whatever you want to call it, the issue is still the same. And so, what is the way that we can actually state that there is a right to drive? So, and I've brought this up repeatedly with FW, but he just wants to ignore it. And when I've challenged him to bring up any case that disagreed with my constitutional claims, he utterly failed. Every case that he brings up has nothing to do with the argument that I'm presenting to him. So what is that argument? So this argument for the right to drive is the 9th Amendment. Now, to understand what the 9th Amendment is, you have to understand that the 9th Amendment is in the Bill of Rights, and it basically is addressing rights that you have that aren't being listed by the Constitution. So that is why it calls those rights unenumerated rights. And so the question is, how many unenumerated rights do you have? They're exhaustive. They're beyond count, because they're part of your sovereignty and your inalienable rights that are not gifted to you by the government. They're endowed to you by the attributes given to you by God, just self-governing and inalienable sovereignty. So, this is something that FW rejects. When I've questioned him about sovereignty, when I've questioned him about inalienable rights, he doesn't want to have it. And that's fine. You know what? Ultimately, FW, what he represents is individuals that are so enslaved to the government that they can't get their head out of the asses of the government and understand what freedom and rights is all about. So I've challenged FW to present a 9th Amendment claim of the right to drive, where you have a court case that is denying a 9th Amendment claim. And in every argument and posting that he posts, he just ignores the argument. He just goes back to the court cases that he addresses, which doesn't ever address the merits of a Ninth Amendment claim. And so the reason why that's important is because a court and a judge or the Supreme Court, they're only going to address arguments that are presented to them. They're not going to address arguments not presented to them. So in dealing with FW's 14th Amendment court case as to its constitutionality for a right to drive, the court was only addressing a 14th Amendment claim. It cannot be said in any way, shape, or form that they were addressing a Ninth Amendment claim. And so, regardless how many times he posts it, no matter how many times he wants to argue the issue, no matter what, it doesn't matter. Now, why can I say that the Ninth Amendment is a right, gives you a right to drive? Because the Ninth Amendment was designed there to cover things that, as I said, the Constitution doesn't list. But the purpose of the Ninth Amendment is to ensure that both the state and the federal government do not infringe upon those natural rights, those inalienable rights. That's what the purpose of the Ninth is really doing. It's trying to address inalienable rights in a way that the Constitution doesn't fully do. And so that's why you have the Ninth Amendment there, and that's why it really is perhaps the best argument for the right to drive from a constitutional standpoint. And the reason why that is also is because the Ninth Amendment clearly says that these unenumerated rights shall not be denied or disparaged by the government, whether it's a federal or the state. Now, the question comes is, can a judge or can a court deny or disparage a Ninth Amendment claim? And I don't believe they can. But so far, there has only been one Ninth Amendment case that has gone before the Supreme Court. I believe the case was called Griswold. I may be mistaken by that. But basically, it was addressing a Ninth Amendment right to privacy. And so basically the decisions that were handed out as a result of that was that you do have a right to privacy, even though it's not listed in the Constitution. You know, there's reasons for the right to be established. And so the Supreme Justice did indeed rule in favor that you have a right to privacy. Now, I would go so far as to say that when the police want to come up to you and ask you for your private information, that you can argue a Ninth Amendment claim and say, well, you know, because they're going to ask you private information like your date of birth, your name, and, you know, these are things that they're information they're wanting to use against you. And so they're going to take whatever you give them and they're going to use it against you. So if you should happen to have a criminal background, they're going to use that against you in your records, and in some ways I understand there is an importance to ensure safety and so forth, but let's say you don't have a criminal background. And let's say the real purpose that they're using the private information you give to them is to really, be able to put something in the system against you. Then do you need to self-incriminate? Do you need to provide information that will ultimately be used against you in any way that they so choose? And I would say that, if you so chose not to give them that information, they're going to arrest you for failure to identify. And I'll tell you why. Because the state and the government, in its desire to force you into their system, have come up with a crime. You're not telling them your name and your date of birth. How they believe that is a crime? Well, ultimately it's their attempt to criminalize anything they can, which they do ad nauseam. So back to the issue with FW. This guy, I have tried to address the varying arguments pertaining to the Ninth Amendment, and he just ignores it. And so that's fine. I don't have any problem with it. FW, you are free to believe whatever the hell you want to believe. It's not going to change my mind. It's not going to change the fact that I do have unenumerated rights that aren't covered by the government. And I believe, and if I were to ever have to fight a case in court, I would certainly argue a Ninth Amendment claim, constitutional claim for a right to drive. And I don't believe that you or anyone else would be able to deny or disparage that right simply because you're trying to convert rights into regulations. Now, the question then comes, does the state have rights to regulate certain rights? Now, yes, the Supreme Court has made rulings that says that states can regulate rights. But can they regulate rights to such a degree that you're no longer allowed to do them? Or you have to pay a fee to do them? And that's where I disagree. Because, for example, we all know that we have a right to keep and bear arms. That's the Second Amendment. Now, the states, varying in their regulations on it, choose to allow certain guns or deny certain guns, allow certain ammunition capacities, or to deny certain ammunition capacities. That's part of the regulating process. They're using their regulation as part of the issue of safety, and so but they're not able to deny wholesale your right to keep and bear arms. Now, does the fact that the Second Amendment is in the Constitution, and whereas the Ninth Amendment is actually in the Bill of Rights, does that matter? It doesn't matter. And so that's what the Ninth Amendment says, that unenumerated rights shall not be denied or disparaged. And any state that denies or disparages unenumerated rights, well, guess what? That is unconstitutional. Just as it would be unconstitutional for a state to say, you don't have a right to keep or bear arms. And so it's on the same level, even though it's not listed in the Constitution directly. And so I've done a lot of research on the Ninth Amendment, and every legal scholar out there really does point out that we have an exhaustive, uncountable amount of unenumerated rights. And so you got to understand what the purpose of government is really all about. The purpose of government is there to secure your rights. And in the Declaration of Independence, it says, men form governments to secure their rights of happiness, of just basically addressing those natural rights that we have. And so the purpose of government is not there. It is not there to convert rights into privileges. I'm sorry, no matter what constitutional book you try to read, it's just not there. So what is the motivation for individuals like FW? Well, I would say that FW is such a, I believe that he probably works in some level of law enforcement. I don't know for sure. The guy hides his image, and if you check out his YouTube channel, you're going to find he doesn't have anything on his channel, because what it is he has other channels that are actually his, but he uses this other channel to comment. So because the comments that he makes are so egregious at times, he's had his other channels basically shut down because of how disrespectful and rude this individual is. So FW, you've been called out, and you're probably going to get your YouTube channel eventually taken down again, because you continue to be rude and disrespectful to people. That is not following the YouTube guidelines. You know what? I mean, me personally, I don't care. You're not even a flea on the back of a dog to me. As far as I'm concerned, you're a government slave. Just like this picture of Boss Hog represents the government with its money-hungry ponzi schemes that it uses to enrich itself against the people. That's what you represent. You represent the dirty cop right next to him, right there. It's part of their schemes, trying to do whatever they can to profit off of people, to criminalize people over things that you call crimes that aren't really crimes. And so you enjoy watching sovereigns getting tased. You enjoy sovereigns getting their windows busted in, arrested, their cars seized. You're just a low-life scumbag that ultimately derives pleasure from that. And that's sad for you, because, one of the things that you kept on trying to do is, whenever I explained my religious beliefs as regards to this as a Christian, you tried to use scripture to justify why you're acting this way. And ultimately, I'm sorry, brother, but the way you have acted with your disrespect and the name calling, I'm sorry, you don't represent anything Christ-like, to be frank with you. And you know what? It shows. It shows in every post you post. You keep calling me names and whatever, and I don't care. I mean, it's no skin off of my nose, but it does expose. It speaks volumes about you, sir. So you can say and do whatever you want. You can post and post and post and post and post. It doesn't matter. I still am going to argue a Ninth Amendment claim of a right to drive. You can try as you will to argue the issue, but you know what? So far, you have not been able to come up with a single case addressing a Ninth Amendment right to drive. And so until you do, sir, you have lost the argument. And people have sovereign, inalienable rights endowed to them by their creator. And I'm sorry, but the government doesn't have those. And ultimately, and this is why he misrepresents the 10th Amendment also, because yes, the 10th Amendment does address states having powers that the federal government doesn't have, but what he always misses is the part of the 10th Amendment that says, or to the people. It lists that as separate from the states. So if the states and the people have that same power, then certainly the people have the ability to reject state authority when that authority is infringing upon their inalienable sovereign rights as well. So this is my video today. I just wanted to address this individual. FW, you, sir, I hope you can figure things out and just eventually come to the realization that nothing you say, no insult that you say against me, no anti-sovereign remarks are going to change my mind unless you can actually present something that addresses the merits of a Ninth Amendment claim. And until such time, sir, I'm not going to accept any of your bogus arguments. And they are all bogus. So with that, continue, people, to live free. Please, if you get an opportunity, please like and share my videos. I really appreciate it. I'm just trying to grow it again, and I've got a long ways to go, so every like helps. And you know what? If you're an individual that believes in freedom, then hey, you know what? Address this guy too, because you know it seems like sometimes, from the sovereign standpoint, that we are fighting a fight against multiple individuals with multiple channels that have connection to law enforcement and so forth, and you know they use their tactics against people who believe in freedom, and it's a sad thing. It's a sad thing that people don't understand that the founding fathers, when they felt that their inalienable sovereign rights were being threatened by the King of England, they got up and they stood on their rights. They didn't allow the government to override their rights. And so that's what I'm doing, you know, and that's what I'm trying to stand on as well. So with that being said, I wish you all the best. God bless, and take care.